Somewhere in Jakarta right now, a 2-year-old is swiping a screen before she can tie her shoes. Her thumb already knows what to do. Her mouth is still learning how to form full sentences. You probably think this is just modern parenting, but the real answer is far stranger. Her brain is being built in real time by a machine designed to hold her attention longer than anything in human history ever has. You grew up with a brain built for something else entirely. Your ancestors' brains were shaped by faces, by weather, by hunger and danger and boredom, long stretches of nothing punctuated by moments that mattered. That rhythm built the architecture you still carry today. Now imagine swapping that rhythm out. What happens to a mind when boredom disappears completely? Start with attention. Your brain did not evolve to track a feed. It evolved to track a horizon, a rustle in the grass, a change in a friend's tone of voice. Psychologist Patricia Greenfield has spent years studying what happens when screens replace that kind of environment. Her research found that heavy media multitasking changes how young brains allocate focus, shifting them toward fast switching and away from sustained depth. Fast switching feels productive. It rarely is. Here's the strange part. The switching itself is the product. Every app on your phone is engineered by teams whose job is to keep your eyes moving, not to inform you, not to connect you, to keep you scrolling. Your brain releases small hits of dopamine when something new appears. A notification, a like, a stranger's opinion. Ancient brains got that same hit from finding food or spotting an ally. Modern brains get it from a red circle with a number inside it. Same chemical, wildly different trigger. Do you ever wonder why 5 minutes on your phone can turn into 50? Now picture a child in Jakarta, Manila, or Ho Chi Minh City, growing up entirely inside this system. Not visiting it occasionally, the way you might have, living inside it. Southeast Asia has some of the highest mobile internet usage in the world, and a huge share of that usage starts before the age of 10. This is not a side effect of childhood anymore. For millions of kids, it is the environment childhood happens in. Psychologist John Twenge has tracked a generation of teenagers who came of age with a smartphone permanently in hand. Her data shows a sharp shift starting in the early 2000s, right when phones became truly personal and constant. Time spent with friends in person dropped. Time spent alone in bedrooms, phone in hand, rose. Sleep got shorter, loneliness got more common, even as connection, technically, became easier than ever. How can a generation be more connected and more alone at the same time? The answer sits in what your brain actually needs from connection. A face-to-face conversation gives you tone, timing, eye contact, 100 tiny signals your nervous system reads without you noticing. A text thread gives you almost none of that. Your brain fills in the gaps, and it usually fills them with anxiety. Is she mad? Why hasn't he replied? Did I say something wrong? That guessing game, repeated hundreds of times a day, is new. Ancient humans never had to wonder if a friend's silence meant rejection. Silence was just silence. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt calls this shift the great rewiring of childhood. His research points to a specific window, roughly between 2010 and 2015, when childhood, in much of the world, moved from play-based to phone-based almost overnight. Haidt's work links this shift to rising rates of anxiety and depression among teenagers across many countries, not just one culture or one platform. The pattern shows up in surveys from the United States, from Europe, and increasingly from fast-growing digital economies across Asia. This is not a Western problem wearing a foreign mask. It is a human nervous system meeting a genuinely new kind of environment. Consider what a brain actually needs to grow well. Boredom, oddly, is one of those needs. A bored brain wanders. Wandering builds imagination, problem-solving, the ability to sit with an unanswered question. Neuroscientists have long noted that this wandering state, sometimes called the default mode network, is where a lot of creative and reflective thinking actually happens. Fill every idle second with a feed, and that wandering never gets a chance to start. The child never gets bored, technically, but she also never gets to think. There is a mirror to this happening in economics, and it might explain more than it seems to at first. Southeast Asia's digital economy has exploded over the last decade, built on the same attention-capturing tools shaping childhood. Ride-hailing apps, e-commerce platforms, short video apps all compete for the same limited resource: human attention. A teenager in Jakarta scrolling for 3 hours a night is not a failure of willpower. She is the target of some of the most sophisticated persuasion engineering ever built, funded by companies whose entire business model depends on her not putting the phone down. Here is the counterintuitive twist. The generation growing up this way is not simply weaker or lazier, as older generations sometimes assume. Their brains are adapting exactly the way brains are supposed to. Adaptation is not the problem. The problem is what they are adapting to. A brain shaped by constant novelty gets very good at noticing new things quickly. It can get worse at sitting with one thing for a long time. A brain trained on instant feedback gets very good at short bursts of effort. It can struggle with the slow, unglamorous work that builds real mastery. These are not moral failures. They are the predictable output of the environment. Psychiatrist Michael Rich, who has spent years studying young people's relationship with digital media at Boston Children's Hospital, describes many of the behaviors parents worry about, not as addiction in the classic sense, but as a mismatch between a developing brain and a relentlessly engineered environment. The brain is doing exactly what brains do. It is optimizing for the world in front of it. The world in front of it happens to be built by engineers, not by evolution. So, what does this mean for you, whether you are the one scrolling or the one watching a child scroll? It does not mean panic. It does not mean nostalgia for a past that had its own problems too. It means understanding that attention is not a personal failing anymore. It is a resource being actively extracted, the way oil or timber once was. Southeast Asia's cities are full of billboards advertising the newest app, the newest platform, the newest way to capture a few more minutes of a stranger's day. Every one of those minutes comes from somewhere. It comes from sleep. It comes from conversation. It comes from boredom and the thinking that boredom used to produce. Think back to that 2-year-old in Jakarta, thumb already fluent, mouth still learning words. She is not broken. She is not doomed. She is simply the first wave of something genuinely unprecedented in human history. A mind built, from its very first years, inside a system optimized to hold it rather than to free it. The question was never really about her. It was about the world you built around her, one notification at a time. Tonight, when you reach for your phone without even deciding to, ask yourself what her brain is learning from watching you do exactly the same thing.